Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 3 of season 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man called Rhino. And as you can probably guess from the title, we are introduced to classic Spider-Man foe, or at least this iteration of him. That is, of course, the Rhino. This is a pretty seriously different take on the Rhino, but let's kind of move on and get right down into it. First thing that I want to talk about actually is I was more than a little amused that it's made blatantly clear in this episode that Peter owns a good old-fashioned iPhone. You can see it's very clear that with the women they're fooling around with it on the roof, and this was just sort of reminded me of if you're familiar with the show Batman Beyond, and how on that show they had cell phones, but they were just incredibly bulky for a show that was supposed to be set something like 40 years in the future. And I remember watching the commentary on one episode where one of the show's guys who made the show said, "We really just didn't anticipate cell phones getting so small so fast." So to bring it back around to Spider-Man, I can't help but think that this is something that's really very clearly going to mark the show as a product of this day and time. Now, not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It is certainly inevitable. You can't really look at a show from maybe 10 or 15 years ago and not see a few things that maybe just don't really ring to modern times. But that's just the nature of technology and culture. People will talk sometimes about how comics should strive for timelessness. But I think there's a limit to just how much you can do that. I mean, you can't really pick up a comic book from 20 years ago and not tell that wasn't made in the early 90s. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I always take that whole timelessness thing to mean don't cram in every little fad, don't beat the people over with the head with very modern pop culture references, because a few years down the line, it's just not going to work as well. I mean, to give you an example, look at an episode of Family Guy from back around 2000, and some of the jokes that were relevant to pop culture-wise back then just don't work quite as well now. But let's get back to what's going on here with Spider-Man, and let's talk about this take on Rhino. And here he's a kid named Alex. He's not given a surname, but just going by the given name that he has, we can tell that he's probably meant to be a riff on the original Rhino, who was actually a Russian guy by the name of Alexei. And he has a full middle name and a surname, but they're all extraordinarily difficult to pronounce. So we're just going to refer to the original Rhino as Alexei. And he was, of course, very classic Spider-Man villain who had the tendency to be portrayed as being kind of dumb. And dumb, but over the years it really kind of ultimately sort of manifested that he was really actually a pretty decent guy at heart. He just wasn't the brightest bulb in the store. He sort of did kind of want to get away from his life, but found himself owing money and favors to people. And he had a habit of things going wrong and getting stuck in the Rhino suit and not being able to take it off. Now, how he went to the bathroom during those times, I have no idea. That's one of those things we're probably just not meant to think about. So the idea that Alex loses some of his intelligence when he becomes the Rhino, that's very in keeping with the theme of how the Rhino was portrayed over the years. And there are even worse stories where the Rhino, I remember one story that I was reading, it was actually an issue of Kazar, where the Rhino had basically become so mentally messed up, damaged by the various scientific experiments that he'd done on himself, that he could barely use a fork properly. And there was actually a miniseries that somebody wrote called Flowers for Rhino, based on the very classic novel Flowers for Algernon, which is all about a person with very, very low intelligence who, through scientific means, is boosted into becoming a genius. But it doesn't last, and he can slowly start feeling himself becoming less and less intelligent, and just the sheer agony of knowing what it was that he was going to revert to what he had once been. I mean, there's a reason why it's very much considered a very classic novel. Now, of course, this is all very far from what we're seeing here is a very condensed, very kid show friendly version of that. And there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of pathos for Alex when he becomes Rhino and this happens to him. In fact, he just seems to willingly accept that this is part of the price of having the power to strike back at Flash, for the part of the price that he has to pay to not feel weak and helpless. And I think that's actually a very interesting aspect of him as a character. That's really not what I was expecting to happen, and I like that the show was willing to surprise me with that. It is like basically just a very interesting twist, and it's also something that makes Alex a potentially very dangerous person because he doesn't really care about the damage he may be doing to himself. He just cares about expressing his anger, and that he's willing to do these things that endanger the lives of innocent people, like attacking warehouses and trains and things like that, in order to satisfy his need for revenge. So yeah, I mean, Alex and Rhino do have the potential to be some really interesting as villains, or characters who may end up straddling the sort of line. He's somebody who really could go either way, and it really will be interesting to see what his future interactions with Peter bring about. Ahem. Now, by the way, did anyone else think it was weird that nobody notices this guy turning into a giant rhino monster, even though he's doing it in front of a high school? In fact, he's doing it while standing between two buses. I mean, seriously, dude, you can't go behind the like a shed or something, or the utility shed at the school or something? You're just gonna do that where somebody driving in the past in a car can see you? And yeah, how is it that this also manages to transform his clothes? It's altering his DNA. And of course the answer is this is a kid show, so we can't really do very much in the way of implied nudity. But still, this is something I just feel the need to point out because that's what we do around here. Now, speaking of things that don't really make sense, is there no stealth mode on the bikes that Peter and Luke have? Because Coulson is sending them off to what's basically a stakeout, and Peter and Luke make it a point of blasting these bikes as loudly as they can through the middle of New York on their way to the stakeout. I mean, what if somebody's already there? They're going to hear you guys coming from way the hell away. But, yeah, I'm overanalyzing again. Now, one thing that I really genuinely would like to praise about this episode is the way that they use the words "be the change." It's brought up by Luke, it's repeated by Peter, and Luke does acknowledge that he in fact swiped that from Iron Fist. Now, what this is actually a slightly condensed version of an extremely famous quote, and that is one that goes, be the change you want to see in the world. This is in fact probably the most famous quote that Gandhi ever came up with. It is certainly one of the quotes that he is best known for. And it's actually words that I personally have taken to heart. I have quoted this particular piece of wisdom to other people here in my real life. And honestly, I think Gandhi was 100% right. In life, you have a very limited amount of control. You have a very limited amount of control over the circumstances in which you live, of the people around you. The thing that you really have the most control over in your life is yourself. So if you want to change the way things are around you, then you yourself are really where that needs to start. So this is extraordinarily good advice that they are throwing out here. And one criticism I do have to level at this episode is it does seem a little bit preachy. Now, of course, bullying is a really serious problem in modern society. It's a problem in the U.S. It's a it's a problem everywhere. And I do think it's very important that we are, as a society, really taking very serious steps to start dealing with this, to treat it with the gravity that it deserves. But that said, this still seemed like they were maybe laying it on just a little too thick. I mean, it certainly is a lot more subtle than some of the other anti-bullying entertainment things that I've seen over the years. The very special episode kind of stuff, if you know what I mean. And of course, I like that. Of course, the heroes really do abdicate. Say, like, revenge is wrong. You need to let teachers know about this, which is, of course, absolutely the correct advice that you should give to kids who are suffering in these sort of situations. But again, it just really kind of felt like they laid it on just a tiny bit too thick. But of course, that's something that's extremely subjective. And let me see here. Little disappointed that we didn't get to see even get any idea at all as to what was going on with the rest of the Amazing Friends. But well, it's not like they don't have lives of their own and interests of their own. So I can personally understand the idea that maybe they were just busy doing something else. And let me see. Anything else? No, actually, I think that covers this episode pretty well. Oh yeah, I actually do want to say something very briefly about the way Coulson was done here. Now, last season was really very critical of the way Coulson was really kind of treated very much as sort of a comedic character. And, well, this is, of course, at its heart, a comedic show. We got a lot of very amusing, little chibi Spider-Man asides this time around. And I think that those have gotten better and better as the series has worn on. But the thing is, though, if you don't really have that stuff where we are reminded that Coulson is a very capable S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, then, he ceases to be someone that we can really take seriously as a character. And I like that Coulson is really very much, straight up, no nonsense here. He's taking what's going on seriously. And when it's all over, he's very professional, very reasonable, acting as a very good mentor, as the way that Nick Fury probably would and should have in that situation had he been there. So I'm really hoping that they're maybe going to kind of tone Coulson's more comedic aspects down this season. If they do that, I think that would be a major improvement in his character, and something that would really help the quality of the show overall. Now, with that said, I am indeed finished with what I have to say about this episode. So, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedis. And until next time, take care and have a good one.